Hey, family. This is Jermaine Thomas, A.K.A. the Professor, with another episode of Sunday School Live. Thank you guys for tuning in. Woo, 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 woo. We are back. We are refreshed for uh, a long break, a needed break, very important break that was needed, and plus in between some holidays, in between there and some vacation. So, much needed self care. Self care is I preach it, I live it, and it's vital, especially to the work in the capacity of work that I do, being a social worker. Okay, so be praying for our social workers. In those medical professionals that's working on the front lines. Things have subsided with respect to COVID, but listen, a lot of people gave a lot, lost a lot during this pandemic, and yeah, so we need to check in on our people. Check in on people. Things are opening up. Things, this thing is we're far away, far removed from where we were earlier this year. So that's a good thing. And we're headed in a good trajectory and things like that. So I'm thankful for that. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. Take the opportunity to like, share, and tell us where you're tuning in from and where you're watching Sunday School Live from, where you're tuning in and subscribing on Goma from. I hope you had the opportunity to check out Dr. Catherine Toon and my brother, Pastor Mike, earlier today. And so there's other great voices that's on the Goma channel, not just me. Listen, we're all great voices. I thank you guys for tracking with us. So we are into a new episode series. This is part 2 of episode 20. I don't know if you guys recall couple of episodes. I said I was going to change the way we categorize our episodes because we're building up our YouTube channel as well. So this is part 2 of part 1 of my divine life, exploring what it is to our human existence. So go back and check out part 1. I'll put a link in the comment section, so you guys can check that out. And I also put the YouTube link in there. Take the opportunity to like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel. There'll be bonus material and commentary on the YouTube channel that you won't necessarily find here. And we come here live uh, every Sunday, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Again, thank you to those that are out there that track with us, that track with here at Sunday School Live and here on the Goma family. Thank you so much. Or those that follow me on Facebook, in my Facebook page, and share. There's I got my little hashtag natural theologian, and so I use the hashtags because it helps you categorize a lot of your posts and things like that. So I started this hashtag called natural theologian. I'm not your theologian, so it's kind of like a play on words, and so a lot of great content material that I shared that I hope would empower you, encourage you, but more importantly, challenge you to think. And if you guys been tracking with me, you all know that this is not an answer show. This is an exploration show. So questions are welcome here. I don't think God is intimidated by our questions in or our exploration to understanding our faith, our faith practices, ourselves, in the world around us. Okay, and how all this thing and all this stuff works together. Anyway, I'm gonna pivot here. Like I said, go back and check out episode 1 because I really laid a groundwork of thought or schools of thought that maybe sometimes are antagonistic. Depends on if you're a purist in that regard, whether that's evolution or intelligent design. I really wanted to lay out various schools of thoughts because we try to look at various topics that we discussed here on Sunday School Live from various schools of thought and perspective, and then just have commentary in between and just sharing. Not that I give concrete answers, but to raise more questions to raise more questions than answers. And so we looked at various schools of thought, whether that's evolution, intelligent design and the philosophy behind that, and uh, faith in our faith practices, the Christian faith, and how we look at uh, this subject matter, or how we explore this subject matter with respect to our life, our divine life. I like to say our divine life. Depending on what school of thought that you track in with respect to the Christian faith, we're wretched uh, sinners, and we have this whole uh, view and perspective of humanity, of total depravity, fallen aspects and things like that. So that we might get into that, we may track into some of that thinking, and get into some of that. But this is just a build up from 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 step and phases in part one that we discussed. Again, those foundational perspectives that I wanted to highlight, because this is the worldview. This is the world that we live in. These are perspectives and schools of thoughts that exist. And I think one of the points that I made in episode in the episode before this one, part one of episode 20, is I wanted to stress the point that you can be Christian and believe in evolution. We sometimes we go to the extremes, and nobody wants to talk about what's in the middle. And so I like to talk about what's in the middle and kind of highlight that, to give us commentary and information, to cause us to think more introspectively, to think and explore within ourselves, or to explore other information and resources that we're not always accustomed to exploring and being exposed to. And so I try to expose the audience, to various schools of thought and other information resources that you normally would not come across or be privy to in a certain religious context. And so, hence Sunday School Live in our approach in taking this. So, this subject is a passion subject for me. As I was preparing for today's episode, I was just basking in the goodness and the awareness of how uh, I no longer have to strive to get a hold of God, or these certain said belief systems or ideas that came from my faith tradition and practice, and filtering that. And many people are on this journey of exploration. We call it deconstruction, deconstructing, reconstructing. No, so wherever you may fall on the spectrum of beliefs, this show, uh, I hope, will resonate with you and what we even discuss and talk about today, considering my divine life, or your divine life, our divine life, and looking at ourselves, seeing ourselves through a certain lens. I think that is important in how we see ourselves in beliefs. We talked about that. That's all in episode one. I did a whole series on the anatomy of belief. Go back, listen, a lot of great stuff that I think just over the span of time to where we are today, it's all a buildup. It all kind of intersects and overlaps in commentary when you if you watch from episode one, or if you've been tracking with us since episode one, or since we came here on Goma. So let me just pivot a little bit. I like to bring up what I call subject experts. They help drive the dialogue and the commentary that we're having with the particular topic that we're discussing. And so, as I shift from the philosophical, uh, uh, scientific theories and discussions and perspectives, as it Lord, I'm losing my mind here. On my train of thought, I'm not losing my mind. I got my mind. I thank God for it. I got a testimony behind it. I may tell it one time too about my mind, but just gathering my thoughts in how I want to, uh, give build this up so that we can get to our subject experts. In this video clip that I want to show, which I think is the highlight of today's episode. I'm going to let this. I normally don't let clips fully play out, but I'm gonna let this clip fully play out. But as I was preparing for the show, for today, I just thought about various things, even my own uh, deconstructing, reconstructing, if you will, and then others. And this is definitely an age of reformation, transformation, and change, where people are questioning everything, and that's a good thing. Because sometimes we can get stuck in the status quo, and that becomes the standard in approach, and nobody can question anything. But I thank God that we live in a nation, right? That we're able to have free flowing thought and commentary, and we can explore these subjects without the fear. Now, there may be some backlash because people disagree with you, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay living in a society where free thought can flow, and we can agree to disagree or disagree. Let's just be nice about it. So you call me a heretic, say Mr. Heretic. But anyway, let me get into this. I'm excited. You can tell I'm probably refreshed, and I'm excited about this episode. And just let me just set this up for you. Um, and so I want to look at and build this thing out, or give evidence to or of, is there an afterlife, or are we just, like I said before in episode one, I mean, yeah, in part one of episode 20, are we just this one cell amoeba, evolved, or evolved from monkeys and apes, or evolution and the missing link and all of that? Um, are we just that, or is there something more? Or you can get into the school of thought, of religion and the Christian faith. We came from Adam. um, God created the heavens and the earth. There was a garden in Adam, and I talked about how um, uh, the Hebraic mind, rabbinic mind, teachers in the Hebraic mind, how they look at that context as purely allegorical, not as some literal account of human creation. Okay, and there's other Genesis accounts and stories that's out there, historically speaking, that speaks to this narrative of our human existence, or questions around our human existence. And those cultures, those ancient cultures at that time, tried to give the answers of how they understood the world around them, or trying to explain their own human existence. And so you can track it to the strange stuff that's out there. Given ancient history, I love history. Is something to dive into if you're into that. I love world history, whether that's cultures, religions, or whatever. So that's an interesting thing to get into. But as I set this up, I wanted to um, propose or raise a question or a thought to consider. Whether I don't know if you've encountered people who are atheists, or people that maybe don't share the same beliefs of the world and how the world works, like you and I, who come out of a Christian tradition, or still in a Christian tradition or practice of faith, and how may look at or try to understand how the world works around us. But again, like I said, this dialogue is in the middle, to at least cause us to think and say, hey, maybe there is something to this. And I thought that the thought that came to my mind was, won't you share about near death experiences, right? And so I said, yeah, that'd be really good to highlight, that speaks to this topic of exploration and discussion about our divine life, or what is it to our human existence. And so the reason why I use this too, because there is science and research behind NDEs, or near death experiences. And these people are people across the spectrums of belief, that people that don't believe in God, people that do believe in God, people that believe in other expressions of faith and practices, of understanding God. And so, and all of them share similar or same experiences in these near death accounts or experiences that these people have had. And so, if there is something to our humanity beyond sinews, bones, flesh, personality, what's projected out in this, what I call this seen, felt realm reality, right? Jermaine, African American man, 43, from Chicago, with two siblings, one older and one younger, a wife and children, family. Is that all of what I am? This social worker, minister, bivocational person, professor. Those are the sum of my parts, but that's not the totality of who I am. And so I hope that something we share or talk about today, even as I pull up this clip, that it would just strike something in your heart and your mind and thinking about your own humanity and your own human existence. And that there may be something more to you or to us than we have given thought or consideration to. And so, with that, I'm going to pull up our subject expert. It's a YouTube video, and I'll give the name. Hold on, let me see if I can find the name of this video. Uh, what I'll do is I'll when I come back, I'll have the name for you guys. But check out this clip. I'm gonna let it play. I'm gonna let it play in its totality, and then I'm gonna come back and give more commentary um, in our episode series of My Divine Life, Part 2 of episode 20. All right, guys, hold on.
The light started to appear. And that's when I realized that this was death. This was my death.
When I died, I was 31. What I experienced from that moment on just changed my life forever. My name is Betty J. Eady. I am 78 years old. I had a near-death experience.
My name is Jessie Sawyer, and I've had a near-death experience. If anybody had told me 10 years ago that I would have had a near-death experience, I would not have believed them. I didn't believe in these things. I didn't even believe in God anymore. I had started becoming sick, and I was going to different doctors and specialists, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. And eventually, after about 9 months of different tests and smaller procedures, they decided that a hysterectomy would help them kind of get a better idea of what was happening inside of me. They didn't find anything wrong on the inside. They did a uterine and ovarian biopsy, and everything was clear. So after 2 nights in the hospital, I was released to go home. It'd probably only been 6 to 8 hours, and I just felt this extreme pain in my stomach. It felt like someone had taken out my insides and put them in a blender, blended them on low power, poured gasoline on them, lit them on fire, and then shoved them back inside of me. So my husband rushed me to the ER. They admitted me. I had very low blood pressure. My heart rate was 145. I was running a low-grade fever, and they did some scans and found out that I was bleeding internally. I didn't have enough blood in my system to really put me back into a surgery. So I started receiving antibiotics. I had blood transfusions. It was probably between like 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And when I slept, there was no way I ever could escape the pain. But I'm staring at the wall, and it was like, the best way I can describe it is that my eyes opened, and then they opened again. And when they opened again, I was in this endless, misty, white room. It was like just this space. And the very first thing that I realized was that I was able to stand up straight, which is something that I hadn't been able to do since the surgery. And I was astonished at how perfect I felt. No pain. I felt like the perfect version of myself. And so that really stuck with me. And in the distance, I saw somebody kind of waiting. And I immediately, even though I didn't see this person at first, I immediately recognized who it was. And it was one of my best friends named Anthony, who had died about 2 years before. And I was just so happy to see him. I wanted to run up to him. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him how much everybody missed him. And then I realized that this was about me. This wasn't some joyous reunion, that something serious was happening. And then behind Anthony and to my right, the light started to appear. And that's when I realized that this was death. This was my death. And Anthony was there to take me home. The light started off as this shimmer, and then it grew. There's no way you can describe it. It is the most profound, most unconditional love. And the light is everything that ever was and ever will be. I instantly felt connected to the entire universe. I kind of was presented a choice. I had something called a life review where I was shown the impact that I had during my life on the world around me. It wasn't judgmental, it was more subjective. It was, this is the energy that you put into the world during your life, and I love you. I'm part of you.
I went in for a routine hysterectomy, and it was during or after the hysterectomy that I actually experienced my death. I was out of recovery and in my private room when I awoke at about 9:30 in the evening. I didn't feel any pain. It was just this feeling as though every last drop of blood had drained from my body. And I tried to reach for the nurse, but I was too weak to reach the little buzzer that they had placed by the side of my bed. I then felt this sensation coming up from my feet, a numbing type thing. And then all of a sudden, I felt a movement in my chest, and then there was a sound like a pop. My spirit came up out of my body in a very tremendous speed, and I could look down and see my body laying on the bed.
While no two near-death experiences are the same, those of us that research them see a very consistent pattern of elements. Very often there's that life-threatening event. The person's nearly dead, they're unconscious, or they may not even have a heartbeat. At that time, they have what's called an out-of-body experience. Consciousness separates from the body and typically goes above the body. They may then go into or through a tunnel. They often see a mystical, unearthly, brilliant light at the end of the tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, they may enter an unearthly, beautiful realm. They may see their deceased relatives at loving reunions, even deceased pets. By this time, they're typically feeling overwhelming positive emotions. They really feel like this realm that seems unearthly to us is really their home.
When I came down and looked at my physical body lying on the bed, then I knew that I had died. And I thought, oh my God, I'm dead. I don't know how I died, but I'm dead. Then suddenly appearing by the side of my bed were three ancient-looking men, ancient in that they were old, but they were beyond old. And they explained to me that I had prematurely died. I wanted so much to see my family, so I went out the window and I traveled to my home. My husband was sitting in a chair reading a newspaper. So I went over and stood by him. I felt concerned that he didn't know I had died, and neither did my children, and I worried about them. I worried how their life would be should I not be there for them. And as I wondered about that, I could see each child. I just saw each phase of their life, and that their lives would be fine even without me. So I felt content, as any mother would, that you know what, they're going to be okay. Then I went back, traveled quickly back to the hospital bed, and was drawn into this immense tunnel. There was sound, there was music, there were chimes. It was extremely relaxing, very comfortable. And I went through the tunnel, into the tunnel, and traveled into this black space. Then suddenly I saw a form at the very end of the light. And as I approached the light, I could see the figure moving with arms spread out like this, and he was Jesus Christ. And I reached for him and put my arms around him as he held me too. And he said, "It's not yet your time. It's not yet your time." some angels or guardians or guards or supporters of him and me came. There were 3 women, and he said, show her everything that she needs to know. Then they took me to a garden, and they said for me to be there, to stay here, enjoy yourself. I went through the garden and walked, and it was beautiful beyond any description. You just simply can't even imagine the colors and the beauty, the flowers of every kind and other kinds that we don't even have here. This is when I learned that I wouldn't remember a great deal of what was going on. I called these men warring angels, in that they came into the garden and they said, are you ready for more? And I says, yes, I am. And they took me, and it was like a freedom of flight. It's like we just rose up into the air and we just went. We traveled from planet to planet. And then Jesus said that I needed to return back to earth. And I says, oh, please, I can't go. Excuse me. I didn't want to leave the love that I felt there, the total acceptance. I saw a beautiful man that I recognized to be the Father, God. And I ran to him and fell at his feet, my head on his lap. And he said, you have a mission, and I want you to see what that mission entails. Then you must go back. I remember traveling quickly. The next thing I knew, I saw my body. I went into the body not because I wanted to, but because I was compelled to. And I felt the dark dankness of it. The human body compared to the spirit body is so, so different.
At the end of the experience, there's often a choice about whether to stay in that beautiful realm or to return to their earthly life. When that decision is ultimately made and they return to their earthly life and they recover, then they can share their near-death experience.
I was shown how my death would impact my family. So I was shown my 2 children, who at the time were 5 and 2 years old. I was shown what their grief would be like. I was shown how that would impact them throughout their life, that they would miss me, but that they would be okay, that their life would thrive. Another person that really stood out was my husband's grief. That grief was, I felt it. I felt his grief like it was mine. It was really intense. I wanted to float down to my husband's body, which I could see sleeping on the fold-out couch. I wanted to tell him that everything would be okay. Anthony kind of squeezed my shoulder lovingly, and he smiled at me like I had answered some unspoken question. And then Anthony and the light both started going this way, and I started falling backwards into my body. Going back into my body hurt. Leaving my body did not. It was like jumping into an ice-cold pool after being in a sauna. It's hard for me to say it was a miraculous healing, but I suddenly started expelling all the blood that had been pooling in my abdominal cavity. I expelled over 2 liters of blood and 800 cc's of fist-sized clots. It scared the entire nursing staff. It scared my family. I mean, it's scary when you see that much blood coming out of a person. But what was odd was that my vitals were improving. I was actually stabilizing, not getting worse. The doctors still don't know what caused my illness to begin with, why my symptoms were happening, exactly where I was bleeding from internally, nor do they know really how I healed from all of that.
We've had people blind from birth that have highly visual near-death experiences, and that's medically inexplicable. We have near-death experiences that occur under general anesthesia, and that should be, if you will, doubly impossible to have your heart stop while you're under anesthesia, and yet there are typical near-death experiences. In addition to that, when you think about it, when you have a cardiac arrest or your heart stops beating, instantly blood stops flowing to the brain. 10 to 20 seconds after that, the electroencephalogram, or EEG, a measure of brain electrical activity, goes absolutely flat. It should be impossible to have any kind of a conscious experience, and yet by the hundreds, people report near-death experiences.
So at my checkup, I asked my surgeon, I said, I saw a light while I was in the hospital, and I was really careful. And he said, oh, I've heard of that happening to people, but I've never had a patient tell me that. And I said, well, how close was I? And he said, Jesse, you were walking the line there for a while.
It was later, 5 years later, that I went to my doctor and I said, something happened to me. I need to discuss it with you, and I want to know if you had any idea that I died. And he said, yes, I was aware of that.
Following a near-death experience, as you can imagine, it's generally very life transformative. People that have a near-death experience, of course, almost uniformly don't fear death. From their perspective, they know what lies beyond death's door, and they know that it's wonderful. Of course, they have an increased belief in afterlife for exactly the same reason, but their values also change. They tend to become less materialistic, more loving. They may change professions, or they may change relationships if they can't express their new values.
I started doing service because service is our best gift to God. When we're helping other people, it is to be of service to them. So I went to the hospital here in Seattle and volunteered at the Cancer Research Center, where I could work with the dying patients as well as their families. So I did that for several years. I began going to various church organizations to speak, to share. I want to go back, and I had Jesus promise me that he will return me to where I left when I had to leave him.
When I started to kind of, I guess, rejoin the world, I felt this intense love for everyone. Not that I was necessarily a selfish person beforehand, but this new feeling was that I cared about everybody I saw. I have no fear of dying. Not that I ever really considered death before, but I could die right now and I would be perfectly okay with that.
Wow, right? Good stuff. Good. From beginning to end. Um, Thank you guys. If you just joining in, take the opportunity to go back once this show ends and watch it from the beginning. And also, I'll put a link to part one. This is part two of episode 20 of My Divine Life. And so we've been exploring and looking at various schools of thoughts with respect to our origin, our anthropology, if you will. And so, in exploring and looking at this, I felt to bring up this clip to talk about or to highlight, um, which is scientific research. This is around these near-death experiences are not just some offshoot experiences, that you can probably write off, but these experiences are happening across different faiths, people with no faith at all, and so they have these common, as the guy was describing, they having these common experiences, common thread of experiences, and the reaction afterwards, after they come back into their body or life, they kind of have a change lens in life and how they approach life. He said their values change. The lady talked about how she was filled with like this immense love for people. Okay, and so again, asking and raising these questions: is there more to our human experience? in our life than what we sometimes give thought and consideration to. Again, this doesn't erode or take away the practicality of life and living, and things like that. And you can and being so focused on the afterlife. This is not that conversation at all. But just this data and research itself seems to suggest, right, that life or our human experience in life, it may be more divine than what we give thought to at times. Whether that's whether you are a practical, scientific, research, person. If I can't prove it, I don't believe it type person, or the extreme and religion and faith. It has to be this. The Bible says it so because the Bible is the authority on this. But when you have the science that gives some credence to these things, it does make you rethink. It does cause you to take a pause and consider life in life in general. And I believe that as we continue to awaken, I believe that humanity, that this awakening of who we are, or what, not just who we are, but of what we are, or where we came from. Are we born from above? Is I know we take Jesus's life, and we talk about everything else is just what it is. The only life that is divine is Jesus, but the scriptures seem to when you give scrutiny and context, whether that's the allegorical, the metaphorical understanding, and you take the stories and accounts of Jesus in his teachings, it seems that he was more so speaking of the aspects of our divine life, not just his. Even though religion, the Christian religion and faith, seems to emphasize and highlight his as exclusive and not all of ours. Even Jesus's conversation with Nicodemus wasn't about born again, wasn't about this what we attach the Christian narrative of salvation to. That was a whole metaphysical conversation about the reality of nature and spirit in being born from above. That was the type of conversation that Jesus and Nicodemus was having. This religious leader in their school of thought and philosophy, and Jesus was like, man, was changing the paradigm and perspective as it relates to understanding not just relationship with God, but our proximity in relationship to God. He talked about being one with the Father. That was unheard of in Jesus's day. God is out there somewhere, the big sky God that you can't really define him or give uh, a description of him. So we have to go to the priest, the temple, to have this ritualistic relationship with our creator. And Jesus was changing the paradigm and perspective and conversation around our humanity and about this life, not just the life to come, but the life here now. Great is he that is in us than he that is in the world. The kingdom of God is within you. The reality, the essence, and the nature of all that God is present within us. And so, then you get into other questions, right? That are philosophical in nature, that you explore. I consider myself to be a novice in Christian philosophy, right? And so, what gears what grinds my what gets my gears, not grind my gears, but what gets my gears to rolling here is I begin to ask more questions, right? Was there ever a genesis in of how we want to define our humanity? Like I said before, we talked about the Adam and Eve um, account and story, and how there are other Genesis accounts and stories that's out there, and how the Hebraic rabbinic teaching and how they looked at um, the the uh, the Genesis account. But Jesus' teaching, much of the commentary of Paul's commentary or writings, seems to suggest that there's something more to our life, that's outside of this realm of ritualistic religious practices, but there is divinity in us just as much as divinity, or what we would consider to be divinity in Jesus, is in us. And so, did we ever have a beginning, right? I know we like to say we're created. I tend to think, or track in the school of thought and thinking, that there was never no beginning for us. It was always eternity. And so, again, the scriptures and the text and the writers seem to say that, in Him we live, move, and have our being. Even though Paul may have been quoting a philosopher of his day, but he pulled that he grabbed that statement and made it a fact within our Christian faith and tradition and perspective to consider that our life, or the genesis of our life, didn't start in the womb, right? That was a vehicle, or a way, or a means to get us here. And so I would say we were born and fashioned and shaped in love. Dr. Catherine Toon, in her book about love, talks about that being, how the fingerprint of God, is upon, how He put His DNA, God's fingerprint upon our DNA. And so there's even exploration in science and research in that about the God gene, if you will. So there's a lot of, if you're the practical person, there's research and stuff to consider, right? Argumentatively, to consider that and to be open minded. That's all I'm saying about being open minded. It's not to win you in a particular argument, but just to consider the thought, or to consider the perspectives, that there is more to our human existence than sometimes we give life and thought to. And it's a part of, I don't know if it's innate within us culturally, with humanity. We lift up figures in life, and we give some mystery or mysticism, some myth around the person, right? And that's natural. There's not nothing necessarily wrong with that. Like, we talk about Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson can knock out 50 men in 10 minutes, right? Now we know that Mike Tyson is a skilled boxer and fighter, right? With these big old guns he has, and knock you out and things like that. But I can't imagine Mike Tyson knocking out 50 dudes, probably of the same size, maybe not the skill and caliber he has, but taking on 50 dudes and knocking them out all in 10 minutes or something like that. I don't see that, but that's kind of how our mind is often geared. With respect, even with we amplify, that's amplified within the context of religion. And so I understand it. So we see that even in some of the writings, in some of these oral traditions, in the Hebraic faith and practice, and telling of these accounts and stories, doesn't necessarily line up historically, right? So David, this king, but historically, there's no uh, uh, evidence to suggest that David was this king like the Bible says that he is. But that's for a whole nother dialogue. I'm bringing that out just to say that when we look at the life of Jesus, we shouldn't just look at the life of Jesus. We should look at the life of humanity conveyed in the message of Jesus, and how this is how what Jesus conveyed and shared is not just true of Jesus, not just true of Christians, but it is true of all humanity. And here it is in the clip that I showed. The lady, the name of the you can find on YouTube is called "I Died." Women share what their near-death experiences were like, and that was a piece by Inside Edition that I used, clearly as educational resource and information to drive this dialogue and conversation that we're having with respect to this discussion and topic about my divine life, our divine life, your divine life. And so, in considering all of this, or considering what I'm presenting today, or what I'm discussing and talking about, is there more to your human existence, my human existence, and our human existence? And so when you look at this clip, when I bring up this clip, this lady talks about how the younger lady talks about how um she didn't have an expressed belief in God. She didn't have belief in God. But yet she had a similar experience to the lady who expressed that when she died, and how she saw Jesus and these angels, and she gave more context to that. But there has to be something to it when you have people from various schools of thought and perspectives and belief systems, having these shared same experiences. man, if we really grasped that and built our theology or anthropology around this idea that we're all born from above. I believe that would change. That's the game changer, right? It is. It's a game changer in our perspective, and our paradigm, and our belief system, and how we treat ourselves and how we treat others around us. If we considered outside of just being evolved from one cell amoebas or monkeys and apes, or we came from Adam and Eve, or I just came by, existence of my mom and my dad. But if we considered, what if we considered our birth just as divine as Jesus's birth? I know that sounds sacrilegious, in some sense, but arguably, if you really think about it, I think that God wants us to have emphasis about our life in our life mission. Jesus is the firstborn of many brethren, or the first to awaken, if you will. Some will argue and say, to this reality of his oneness with the Father, and shared that message. This was shifted the paradigm, the religious paradigm of the people of the day and those that followed him. And then this movement, right, that spread from this offshoot religion, or practice, or school of thought, or philosophy that was rising in the midst of this Jewish tradition, um, uh, uh, government, kingdom government, right? That was ran, theocracy type government that was ran by these by the Romans overseeing it, and then King Herod and the Jews and the Pharisees, Sadducees governing the people, right? So this was kind of their government. And so this is how they saw and how they related to God. But Jesus was changing the narrative. Right? He was showing that everybody is equal. Everybody, is on the same playing field. All of our lives have value. All of our lives have worth. And so even the lady in the video talks about how, this encounter she had in this near-death experience, and Jesus told her she died prematurely. You need to go back. You got a mission. You got a purpose to fulfill, in the world. And so I don't think that again, arguably, it's not nothing wrong to say that yes, Jesus's life was divine, it was purposeful, it was impactful. But to discount and say that your life, has no value or no worth other than seeing it in the light of who Jesus is, I think our wires are crossed in that. And there's nothing sacrilegious about that at all. I believe God would encourage that. I believe our belief, outside of belief in God, because God is aware of who we are, so he don't need our belief in order to be God, right? I think our belief is more so about ourselves and how we see ourselves. Um, and are we just mere humans? Are we just mere humans? Or is there something more to our human existence than what we give awareness to, attention to, or life to, or consideration of, when it comes to thinking about our life? And so we're going to continue to dive more into this subject and exploration. Again, this is a thinking show, a questioning show. This is not necessarily an answer show, but it's an opportunity to look at um, various subjects, thoughts, and themes with respect to our Christian faith. Some taboo, to talk about. I haven't gotten to all the taboo stuff. I think I touched on the rim of some stuff. But you can go and check out our YouTube channel, and there's other content and commentary that's there, and shows that we have done, that I believe, I hope and believe, would empower you, encourage you, but more importantly, challenge you to think. So check that out. But we're going to dive more into this conversation about our human existence. Our my divine life, your divine life, our divine life. Is there something more to our human existence that we give thought and consideration to? And so, what I wanted to share and bring in these episode series uh, is information that you're not necessarily exposed to. Again, our world is a big world, and I think a part of that is understanding, you know, with respect to understanding people's beliefs and what's out there. That's unique and different to our own beliefs, ideas, and perceptions, and so and having an open mind around that. I'm very leery nowadays of these absolutes, um, in a religious context, right? Because then, or because it creates a certain superiority of information. We're right, you're wrong. And so if you're not doing it our way, or seeing it our way, or thinking it our way, or believing it our way, you're out. And I believe that spirit is about liberation, and of freeing us from these ideas and notions that we're just mere men, liberating us from these limited belief systems and thinking of ourselves. A lot of our beliefs are embedded in our social constructs and how we're raised and how we're shaped and how we grow up. It's like that thing about nature versus nurture, how the environment, imposes upon us an idea and a belief system about how the world works. If it's just taste, touch, sight, hearing, then that's it. Anything else other than that, you crazy. You're one of them, religion people, and your religion is your crutch. And maybe in some instance, there may be some truth to that for some people. But there are some of us in the middle of the road they don't want to, jump into the extremes. But to be open-minded is important. And so this is what this show is about too, is appealing some aspect to objectivity and not being biased one way or another. So exposing you to these what I call subject experts and clips to help us to drive this conversation and dialogue along, and exploring what it is to our human existence, or about our divine life, or this topic about our divine life, my divine life, and humanity's divine life. If we could see each other in that light, if we could hold each other in that light of understanding, I believe that that will have real world impact. And it is, and it's happening. People are waking up, across the religious spectrum of ideology and beliefs, and waking up to to the awareness of their own humanity and how divine it really is. There's something beautiful about that. I was reflecting and I was thinking about this when it comes to women, and how, when you consider all of this, philosophically speaking, right? If that a woman has not only the capacity, right, to carry her own human essence, life force, if you will, or the essence of all that God is present in her, but then she also has the capacity to be this bridge and this gateway to carry not only her life force, but the life force of another human existence. A woman can carry twins, I think what I don't know, the triplets, Kate plus 8 and all the kids she done had. So, but this bridge of this between heaven and earth, or this dimension of understanding. Heaven is not, I don't consider heaven as something outside of us, but a reality in us. And you heard that in the dialogue and the commentary. Again, this lady, the younger lady, is not a Christian, right? She talked about how, I felt connected to the universe. And so we even see it even in the science and quantum entanglement, and again, this is the science now. This is not religion. This is not, somebody, who is dogmatic, who is biased, and saying no, this is the way to go and to believe. No, this is science, right? The critical eye of our humanity, that keeps us grounded in some respect. Data research is all important. I don't want to discount science, and I don't want to throw shade totally at religion, right? But it's a context. It serves as a context, and it gives us language and understanding. And what really drives our science is trying to understand the world around us and how it works and how we exist or coexist in this world, and give us some good answers and not. And sometimes, but what the science does is gives a good foundation to build upon. And so, in quantum science, when it comes to quantum entanglement, is showing this oddity of how I say an oddity because we haven't really give thought to it. How everything is really connected. This lady talked about how you know the essence of what she was feeling, this love that she felt, this love that's unearthly, that's off that, and she came back, full of it and ready to give it out. Now, heaven, I believe, is in us. The kingdom of God is in us. So I don't think we have to have, and that's what this show is not about. We're not talking about death. We might get into that topic in discussion, but you don't have to have a near-death experience to have these encounters, right? The reality of heaven and all that God is present in at the core of our human existence. And so just becoming aware of that, causes you to be sensitive to this love, that we were born and fashioned in love, that we all came from love with a purpose. Um, maybe we had a dialogue in that, in eternity past. Maybe we had a conversation, about us coming here too, not just Jesus. Revelation gives this commentary like who's gonna go. But if we all were in Christ, I think we all said we're gonna go. And so, since Jesus to now, there's been generations of people that's been born. And look at the advancement that we have had in humanity since the birth or since the account and story of Jesus, right? and to where we are now, cures for cancer, better. I ain't gonna say well. I'm declaring it cures for cancer, right? But better treatment to address things within our human physical frame and body, uh, technological advancement, and breakthrough, that has increased the quality of life and increased the quality of life so much that there's a longevity of life. People are living longer, and things like that. And so all of that has come out of humanity. But going back to the woman real quick, I just wanted to highlight that, about is there something more to our life and divine life sometimes that we don't give life and understand awareness to at times. But yeah, but the woman to be this bridge between heaven and earth, and bring other eternal beings into this world, become a gateway. I think that is really profound. And I think that if we gave life to that and thought to that, we wouldn't have these religious systems of thought that treat women as second class citizens. If anything, we should be worshiping women. I know that's sacrilegious in saying that, but I'm just saying in regard, if we had an expanded definition around worship and in our thinking, I think that would change too. I would rather, because they say what you put your affection to and what you worship, you truly serve, and we need to worship humanity. If anything, to worship humanity is to worship God because we all the express image of God, and I don't mean worship like bow down, but it is service and gratitude and appreciation and value. This is what we do and express ourselves in music and worship. But worship in its most in the definition that I have for worship is being your authentic and genuine self. Um, that's to me defines worship. But so, but that we'll land the plane there. Check us out. If I hope something that I shared or what was shared during this lecture series of my divine life, episode 20, part 2 of episode 20. Go back and check out part 1. Keep tracking with us. Thank you. Special shout out to our Goma family as a whole. Thank you for tracking with us. Sister Connie, thank you for jumping in here. And to those that will watch us and follow the broadcast later via YouTube or Facebook. Till next time, this is Jermaine Thomas of Sunday School Live, A.K.A. the Professor. Thank you. God bless. And I hope to see you guys next week, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time here on Goma. God bless. Bye-bye.